Hey everybody, welcome back to Church Public. I am Matt Odegaard, your host. Today we have a very special guest, and I'm excited to introduce one of the student ministry leaders at the church that I attend. And so for your parents out there, hopefully this is a great time to learn something about how you parent, how your student interacts with this world and with the church. And that's really what we want to bring. We want to bring help to you as you disciple your own kids and bring them into the family of God, because really I want this to be a resource for the church, for the public, because we know that you don't just live in your home, you don't just live in your family, and you have to go out and figure out what it really looks like. So without further ado, welcome to Church Public. Thanks for being here. All right, again, thanks for being here. I'm here with Nick Henderson, and I'm going to have him introduce himself in just a second. But again, thanks for being part of this channel. You can always check everything out at churchpublic.com and send me any messages there if you have questions. So, Nick, thanks for being here.
Hey, of course, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Just tell me a little of your story. Who are you? What do you do? And how did you get into this student ministry?
Well, obviously, my name's Nick, like you already mentioned, and I serve as a youth pastor at Second Baptist, but specifically for high school students. I've been doing it for going on probably 5 years now, 4 to 5 years, and originally went to college at Liberty University, studied Bible there, but how I got into ministry is a little bit more unique. So I didn't grow up in a Christian home per se, and so oddly enough, I really had no context or perspective on like what ministry even was. I got saved, really became a Christian when I was maybe 16, 17 years old. So, older than most of my constituents. So for me, not even really understanding religion in general, I surely didn't understand the business of it or serving, making it a career or understanding any of that. I just knew that I liked church and I enjoyed it. And so it wasn't until I had a conversation with a coach in high school that he asked me, he said, Nick, what do you want to do? What are you going to study in college? What are you going to major in? As most seniors and juniors are kind of discussing. And I told him, I like engineering, or maybe this over here, or maybe I could do sales, or just some solid options. And he said, but I told him, I said, I'd love to do what our pastor does, maybe do that on the weekend, when he gets some spare time or something like that. He's like, you understand he does that full time.
Yeah.
That's all he does. He doesn't go to a normal job or Monday through Friday. That's his full-time gig. He gets paid, he provides for his family doing that. And it kind of put some feet to a passion that I already had, which was, man, I love this stuff. I told him immediately, if I can do that full time, I'd love to do it. And it was just weird because I felt like the Lord had been calling me for a long time in ministry, but I was just so immature in my faith at the time. I really had no clue. And that call really started, it was probably recognized in that moment, in that conversation, which I got to have more conversations and solidify that call down the road more and more. But it really started as more of an angst, not necessarily oh man, that's really cool, as it kind of came out when I was 17, but more of a stress and angst because when I was young, I lost my dad to a drug overdose. But at the time, I didn't understand eternity, I didn't understand those Christian aspects. And so my dad, for what many can ever understand, is at least I didn't ever see him commit his life to Christ or really come to a point where he became a Christian. So as I became a Christian, I struggled with that a lot.
Sure.
And that angst was really what drew me into, okay, I think I'd like to help other people who are kind of going through this, or at least equip them to make sure that they don't really have to go through the things that I've had to battle, whether it's a loved one who loses out on an opportunity to experience God's grace, or, equip them to evangelize, or maybe just help them know it in general. And so that's really where it all started, and it was kind of formulated and solidified on that day where my coach was just like, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, I want to do this. And then from then on, I had a Southern Baptist pastor who said, well, you got to go get your Bible degree, which for all those listening, you don't have to have a Bible degree to serve in ministry.
Right.
But, he was very old-fashioned, said, you need to get you one, you need to know the Word of God. And went to Liberty University, graduated, and my first job was in Houston, Texas, where I serve at right now. So that's what it's been, and it's been awesome. It's been a great 4 or 5 years with the student ministry. So
that's great. I know we have some fans of Liberty University, and that's a wonderful experience. So I'm hearing that you had a fire, a passion to connect with students and to make sure that they understood what their faith means.
Yep.
How has that played out in student ministry as you've gone through that?
I mean, I think that's the epitome of why I serve, right? Is helping them understand that faith is something that you own, not something that is passed down. And so
say that again, because that's really good. I don't want to miss that.
Yeah, absolutely. Faith is something you own. It's not something that's passed down. And so a lot of people feel like they can become a Christian by osmosis when you only become a Christian by commitment.
Right.
And so my biggest thing, and I will say, I've come into a context in which I did not grow up in. And so there was a big adjustment period trying to minister to students and teenagers who are from Christian homes, because I myself am not from one.
Because they grew up in it, and so you're coming in and catching up to some things.
So, and a lot of times, I think it was, a basketball coach they talked about. I think he was a UCLA coach. I can't remember exactly, but he talked about how you got to break people down to build them up.
That's good.
And a lot of what I found in ministry is breaking kind of what these Christian constructs are, of like, oh, well, I go to church, so I'm a Christian, or I don't cuss, or maybe it's the language, the language I listen to on my music, or the videos I do or do not watch, whatever it may be, and for good reason. Parents, I think, try to mentor their children and guide them in the right way to the right things and right behaviors, but it becomes behavior-based, which we all know that we have a grace-based religion that's built on what God has done for us, not what we can do for Him, because what we can do for Him is not much. And so I find a lot of student ministry is not necessarily like it should be. It's funny that it's not. I thought it would be. I thought it would be like, I'm sharing the gospel to kids who have no clue about Jesus, and no idea of this God that loves them. When in reality, I'm more taking kids and breaking them down to the basics and saying, okay, let's remove all this behavior stuff. Do you recognize that on your worst day, God loves you? And it's not because you live in this place and do these things or play these sports or whatever it may be, but it's because He loves you as His creation. So let's break it down to there. And then let's see, have you made that commitment? And so that's what a lot of ministry has been so far, which has been an interesting adjustment to what I assumed it would be. But it's very joyful in helping them own their faith and recognize that, hey, God loves you, and as a result of that, we live for gratitude for Him. And so that's been really fun, and I enjoyed it.
I love that, and it's such a good thing. So just to catch me up, because I know that you said you spent some time in Florida and then went to Liberty. Did you go straight to Texas for student ministry, or were you?
Yeah. So
how did that go? How did that process go?
So yeah, you're right. I grew up born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana, but moved over. Obviously I mentioned my dad had passed away, so my single mom and I moved over to Florida after Hurricane Katrina in 2005. Went through high school there, and then attempted some athletics in another college, a little side street, but then went to Liberty for my sophomore, junior year. And I actually, and we can delve into this more if you'd like to, but my mom passed away in college as well. And so long story short, that obviously caused some difficulties and complexities in my own life, to where, financially speaking, that had to be figured out. And so I couldn't pay for my senior year of college. And so Second Baptist, I interviewed with them for an internship, and they were willing to take a chance on me and say, you know what, Nick, like, we'll take care of your housing, and we'll take care of some of these things that you're kind of in need of, and we'll let you come down for your senior year. And so I came on as kind of like a pseudo intern. They call me a fellow, which I think is just a really fancy word for intern, but whatever it may be.
That's fine.
But it was a great opportunity. And so I've literally been at Second Baptist Houston before I even graduated college. So it's been my first and only full-time position. And I couldn't have imagined going anywhere else. I mean, they've been so kind and good to me, and they really gave me a shot when I probably, frankly, wasn't worthy of it. So,
I mean, that's an incredible story, and I mean, I'm hearing the tragedy in that, and I mean, we probably could spend a couple hours going on that, and I don't want to make you rehash that, but I'm processing through, the tragedy of losing your dad and losing your mom, but then the grace that the church showed you in that is truly incredible. And I mean, I can say from my own life too, like, I definitely had people pour into me in my high school, college years when I was, and I grew up in the church, so my story is a little bit different, but I was doing college and teenage things during those times, and I had mentors that poured into me when I'm feeling you like I didn't deserve that, right? I didn't deserve the chances that I got, and so I was doing some music ministry and other leadership things at that time, and maybe I feel the same as you. I look back and go, I don't know what they saw in me. Like I don't know that I would see that kind of thing in me. But I love that kind of story, and the reason I highlight that is I just love the way that God moves in His people, in His church, and in growing people to their potential. And He uses, I mean, you just look back at Bible stories constantly, like almost every Bible story is about some nobody or some person who shouldn't be qualified to do the thing that they do. And again, the reason I'm highlighting that and for us listening and as we process through this, like you can speak into this, I just feel like that's a great story for the potential of students. That's why I appreciate you and appreciate you serving in student ministry, and I feel such a value in parents and parents parenting their kids and leading their kids, because by very nature kids are potential. They just are that lump of clay that needs to be shaped into something.
Absolutely.
And it takes someone to see that and to say, okay, we're going to do that, and we're going to pour into that. And so it takes, I mean, and then you get into like that really is just discipleship by and large. I mean, that's just what discipleship is as you pour into that.
No, and I 100% agree. I think, even as you read through specifically Paul's letters in the Bible, not to go too into the weeds with it, but something that was interesting I was reading up on the other day, and I believe Romans, everything he says when he lists off, he'll write to a specific church about a specific issue for a specific reason, but he'll list off the issues or the dilemmas that they're facing, but always bring it back to, but always remember that we're all sinners, that we're all in need of the mercy and the grace and the forgiveness of God. And then he'll go on about some other issues. Say, hey, I've heard some of you have done this or done that. He's like, but just always remember is that we are nothing without the mercy and the grace and the forgiveness of God. And I feel like for the student ministry, I try to follow that example when it comes to, hey, we've got this over here. Maybe it's better to surround yourself with the right people in that environment is everything. And they show me your friends and show me your future and all that great stuff. But at the end of the day, always remember that I don't care who your friends are, I don't care how you speak, I don't care how much money you have or do not have, or how good you are at football, or if you sit the bench. It really is irrelevant to me, because we are all sinners in need of the mercy and the grace and the forgiveness of God. And I feel like that information and just that nugget of wisdom will take you wherever you need to go in your faith. Because if you rely on God and His grace, you'll figure your way out of any circumstance or any dilemma that anything the world can throw at you. So
I love that. I love that, and I was thinking in terms of one of the things I've seen in at least the current generation, maybe past generation or so, is total generalization, but a bit of entitlement, right? And the feeling like, and there are a lot of what I'll say, there are a lot of pastors and leaders who are saying, you're good enough as you are. You got, you are who you are, and you're amazing in who you are. But like you're saying, and what I've read in Paul and Romans and Jesus and all it's actually the opposite. It's that we're actually not good enough. And the good news is we have the grace. We have the mercy of God that we, again, going back to Romans, we don't deserve. And it's that knowledge that we're not quite good enough. How do you find that in student ministry, or how, like, if you want to give a generalization of where the students you come into contact with, like, are they more on the side of like, I'm just a terrible person, or are they more on the side of like, I'm amazing, so like here I go?
No, I think it's interesting, generalizations, and you're right. I mean, they always can be kind of tricky. Every student is so different. I
have 4 kids, and they're all
they're all perfect.
So I get it.
Your kids are all perfect too. I mean, none of them are entitled to have any problems that teenagers have.
None at all.
But I will say, by and large, because I do speak to your generalization, because there are some that do need encouragement, and there are some where there are young teenage girls. A conversation I had the other day where just had to look her in the eye and say, you need to recognize that on your worst day, whenever you've done with whatever, with whoever, and said whatever to whoever, that God loves you. Because it's never built on what you could have done. It's always built on what He has done for you on the cross. So those are conversations that I have. But I will say, by and large, they tend to believe that, hey, I'm good, like I can kind of do whatever I want because I have these accolades or, whatever it may be. And plus, when you combine that with the fact that we live in a decently affluent area,
Sure.
Which was also a context that I brought over here. I didn't grow up in that.
Sure.
And I don't glorify that. It's just reality.
Sure.
And so that was another perspective I wanted to bring, which is not everybody has the things that you have.
No.
And I tell them, you are at a disadvantage
Yeah.
to living a life of purpose and honor and glory to God than I was. Because for me, understanding, like buying into this idea of like God can give you more than what you ever could have imagined was so easy for me because I didn't have much.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have a car for your 16th birthday, or you get the new PlayStation 5, or you can get the shoes that you want when you want them, or whatever it may be, it's pretty hard to buy into this idea that a life of honor and serving God is better than what you already have. So there's that. And we do speak to that, and we do try to provide them that perspective like, hey, God is better. God's way is better than your way. And it is about breaking that down consistently. But, I will say this caveat, and I talked to the students about this the other day, this idea of self-care and like self-worth or entitlement or self-esteem, whatever it may be, which is a big push right now. I tell the students and anybody, parents that I've talked to, young adults, I say self-care, self-belief, this idea of if it's meant to be, it's up to me, is very advantageous to be successful in the world. And I don't know if you know that.
Yeah.
If you want to do something, look yourself in the mirror 10 minutes before you do it and tell yourself that you can do it.
Sure.
Of course. Like, self-belief will get you through anything on this planet. But I do say there's just one problem with that. This isn't our home.
Nope.
We're just visiting here. We live life for heaven. And so if you predicate everything on your success on what happens on this planet, then you're wrong as it is. And you're measuring with the wrong measuring instrument.
Yeah.
And so that's the issue when it comes to that, is recognizing, hey, this isn't the end goal. Like, you having what you need here is not the end goal. It's honoring God and then letting the chips fall where they may on the earth. So that's kind of the angle that I like to take it from.
That's so good. And you reminded me of, like, there's very few people that Jesus has interactions with all kinds of different people. And some people he says, come follow me, and they drop everything and go.
Yep.
And some people just want to kill him. And then there's just this little segment in the middle that's very few of people, and I'm thinking of the rich young ruler, who comes and says, hey, I want to come with you, and I did everything right. And he's like, get rid of everything.
Yeah.
And the guy goes away sad.
Absolutely.
And you're just like, it's such a good statement to remember. And Paul talks a lot about this too, in that being content in a lot and being content in a little. And we have so much that we don't necessarily appreciate how much we have unless you've spent time in other countries or in other parts of America that have less, of which there are. And we lose that perspective, and it's really easy to lose that perspective. And it's that love of money that gets in. Not that money is bad, but your dependence has to be on God, and this culture obviously is not that.
Yeah.
And that's where I was aiming to, and just wondering how much the culture seeps into the students, because that's what I see in culture for sure. In every part of marketing is you're great and you're amazing and all these things. And
how I like to communicate that too is, I tell them there's things in this world that are positive things, there's negative things, and there's neutral things. Neutral things are money, neutral things are music, neutral things are fashion, neutral things are sports. So, insert whatever you want to put into there. Things that you partake in on a daily basis that aren't bad, aren't good, they're just a neutral thing. Frankly, I tell them this all the time. Every time we congratulate a win for a football team, or Katie wins, or this school wins over here, does something like that, I'm like, hey, congratulations, guys, but just remember that God is bigger than the sport that you play. And that God, when you pray before your games, I tell the athletes this, when you pray before your games, just recognize God doesn't care if you win or not.
Yep.
Not at all. It doesn't matter to him. It may matter to you, but God doesn't care. And I tell them, God cares about how you honor and glorify him through it. And so but I tell them neutral things can become negative things very quickly. I said, neutral thing is football practice ends at 6 o'clock or at church by 6:30. That's a neutral thing.
Yeah.
Neutral can become negative when your football practice goes till 6 and you want to get extra reps and you miss church for it. Your grades are a neutral thing. I'm glad if you want a 4.0 GPA, and I applaud you for that, because work honors God. That's great. But a neutral thing like grades can become a negative thing very quickly if you miss all the services or you miss the necessary connections with friends because you're always studying. These neutral things can become negative things very quickly, and so that's kind of how I go about teasing that out is, hey, let's not blame football because football's not to blame. It's your mindset that you have with this neutral thing that God is giving you as a gift, and you're abusing the gift. And so that's kind of how I go about helping them frame that up.
I want to hear you speaking about as priorities, right?
Yeah.
And setting those appropriately. And I do want to kind of turn the coin around and look at a parent's place as well. But I really appreciate you bringing up the idea of sports, bringing up the idea of other. You can just lump in any kind of other activities and music and dance, and there's so many things, right? All the things that you can do, and in grades too, because that's. Everybody's like, you gotta get all the grades. So
especially in this area. Since
you gotta get all the grades, because if you don't, then you won't get in, and then you'll die, and whatever. It seems that, I make a little joke, but it does seem that
won't get into your favorite college, and you'll just disintegrate.
Right, right. So I look at that, and obviously I'm maybe showing my hand, like I have an opposite view of I think the soul has more value.
Oh, yeah.
And those things, like you said, can be important, but are not the important thing.
Yep.
So, you're talking about kids and the students and them making good choices. What would you, or what do you say to parents in terms of those choices? Because just from my knowledge, I know that the sports don't care. They don't care about the family. They don't care about you. They want to win. They want to do all those things. And so they're now scheduling games every night or practices every night or whatever, and the games and the practices on Saturdays and Sundays. And so they are, to me, directly competing with church, probably apathetically, maybe maliciously. Otherwise, they just don't care, right? That's what I see in terms of culture, because they have their agenda and doesn't include God. So how do you talk to, or do you talk to parents about that, or how do you help parents, or how can we parents make good choices about that?
I'll say, and I tell every parent this because I'm 26 years old and I don't have kids. I tell them I'm not going to offer you a parental perspective because frankly I can't give you one.
Fair.
I'm going to offer you something better.
Yeah.
I'm going to offer you a pastoral perspective.
Love that.
Because you don't need another parent perspective because you have all the parent perspective you need, which is you. You've only been a parent to these kids and you know everything about a parent perspective. So I'm going to offer you a different perspective. And I tell them, when it comes to scheduling specifically, I was like, you would be shocked to know how well the devil uses these neutral things. Travel ball, band, all these things that are just, oh man, it's so good that my kid's involved, and I'm just happy that he's got friends and happy that she's, so successful, so focused, she's so driven, and we're so, and that's a great attribute to have.
Sure.
But you should be focused on the fact that her soul needs Jesus Christ and needs to be filled with legitimate relationships that push her further in her faith. That boy that you have, who loves sports and he's so connected to his teammates, needs to be connected to Christian community as well. And so I tell them, I just ask them, what is the end goal? And I'm not saying, I'm a guy who played sports growing up, who understands that travel ball is busy, and frankly was a teenager who missed church often because we had games on Sundays.
Yeah. And
I look back and I say, wow, I was deprived of so much because I needed a trophy that I don't know where it is anymore, frankly. And I'm also I also don't play baseball anymore. Surprise, surprise. That ended. Crazy, but I'm still a Christian.
Right.
But I still need to grow my faith, and I still need relationships. And I felt like I really lost out on a big chunk of that potential because I felt like at some point this sport was bigger than that. And so it goes back to the same thing. Are you turning a neutral thing into a negative thing by allowing this? And I tell parents all the time, kid's got a baseball game on Sunday, why can't he miss it? Why can't we set the standard that your kid doesn't have to go play at 9 a.m.? Why can't he come to Bible study first? Why can't he go to service first?
Yeah.
What are you teaching him when you just say, well, let's put on the stream in the car, and that's church? But think on the flip side, vice versa, not even on the negative side of that, what are you teaching him if you say, hey son, sorry that your team lost, you're in the bottom seed. You shouldn't have done that because now we're going to miss the first game because we got to get to church first.
Yeah.
I don't care if your game's in Nacogdoches or 3 hours away, 6 hours away. We're going to be at church this morning, and we're going to handle this and show you that our top priority is Jesus Christ.
I love that.
And baseball's after that. And I think that's what an incredible teaching opportunity that is
What
for the
a
kids.
teaching opportunity.
So that's what I tell the parents. Like that's the pastoral perspective on it. So
I absolutely love that, and I completely agree 100%. And we've talked to our kids about that, but I love that you're expanding that as well, because that is really the thing. And I mean, we've even had internal conversations in my family where it's like, well, you don't have enough friends, or we need to be in these places where there are more friends, the sports and the schools and whatever. And that sounds like the right answer until you realize like it's not about all the friends, it's about the right friends. That really is a crucial distinction. And you need to know people that, I think you said it this way, like are going to move you towards Jesus. And we know that in this culture, like the peer groups are so powerful. And especially, I mean, I'll just kind of like generalize about parenting right now that like a lot of parents are not active parents. They send their kids to sports, they send their kids to school, the kids are doing video games after school, after all the things, and FaceTime between parents and kids is very low, and that's something that I have a heart for, because I think that's the most important thing. You only have, like the way I'll say it, and the way I've said it before is, you only have 18 years with your kid, and those years go by really fast. And you need to maximize that time, because if you look up and your kid is off the rails.
And I want to emphasize that too. I mean, I came in and, you know, the kids that are going to be graduating this year, I came in there in 7th grade, 7th, 8th grade. And every year we do a senior breakfast. And every year the parents are just shocked at the fact that their kid somehow graduated high school and is going to college and is now an adult. And so you're absolutely right, where that hits every single person much more suddenly and quicker than they ever anticipated.
I used to have, I don't have it behind me anymore, but I used to have, and you can decide to take this or not, or anybody can take this if you want, but I used to have this jar. Actually, I think it got destroyed in the move, but anyway, I used to have this glass jar with marbles in it. And there was a marble for every week of your child through 18. So it was a lot. I'm not super good at math. It was 900 and something. It doesn't matter.
A lot of weeks.
And about 5 years ago, I just looked at it, and you know, one of the jars was like half empty, one was in all this, and you're like, oh man. And it's such a good visual of how fast it goes. And you just have to consistently keep that in mind. I think it's so important. Let's just let me ask you one more question before we start wrapping up. Like, is there anything else that you want to tell parents how to get in the game and be proactive for their students? How can they come alongside? How can they help? How can they disciple? How can they get into this?
I would see, you know, one of the more helpless places I've found parents in, and which is for the most part when they reach out to me, is when their kid won't open up to them, but they'll open up to others. You know, maybe it's myself, maybe it's a small leader, whatever it may be, and they feel that's hurtful. I understand that. You know, you've raised this child, you know, for the whole life, and you've been there for them and provided for them, and now they get to this point where they have, you know, whether they're smoking or drinking or just with the wrong crowd, or, you know, doing whatever we feel like their behavior is in opposition to what we feel like it should be, and they won't open up to us about it. They won't tell you. They won't be honest with you. They lie to you, frankly. And that's a hurtful place to be. A terrible place to be as a parent. I understand that. I fully, you know, empathize with that. And I would say parents who are in that situation where they feel like their teenager's closed off, which probably is 99.9% of people who have teenagers, because teenagers are naturally very closed off. It's hard to get them to open up. I would just tell them this, and something that I live by as a pastor, and I feel like would apply to parents too, is that love breaks all barriers.
That's good.
Consistent love breaks all barriers. Meaning this, you may feel like, of course I love my child. Like most parents love their children, that is true. But do you execute that love? You know, are there, for example, I'm a big fan of systems breed success. You have a system that shows love. Not like, well, you know, I'm feeling this way, so I'm going to do this for my kid. Or I'm feeling angry, so I'm going to do this for my kid. Instead, do you have a systemized way of reaching out to your kid every single day? Do you have a way of saying, hey, 10 minutes when they get home, I want to make sure that I put my phone down, or I'm on my computer, or even if I work remotely, I'm going to step out of my office and say, hey, this Zoom's going to have to take a break, or I'm going to schedule myself around for when my kid gets home at 3 o'clock. I'm available.
I love that.
Just for the opportunity that maybe they want to talk. If they go sit down and do their homework, maybe I make them a sandwich when they get home, or whatever it may be. And you're just consistently showing up and saying, hey, I care about you. How are you doing? You know, how's your soul? How's your friends? You know, it could be anything. How is Tommy doing?
Yeah.
How is Sarah doing? Anything you can just contrive in your mind to ask them about. But being intentional about being available for them in that way, it doesn't have to be a long time. And frankly, they don't want it to be a long time.
No, they don't.
But if you could give them 10 to 30 minutes a day where you just, okay, I put everything away, let me be curious for 10 to 30 minutes, do something for them as well. It could be food, it could be a drink, it could be whatever it may be. But be intentional in showing that, and love breaks all barriers. That eventually they will crack, and eventually you'll find that your teenager opens up more and more and more. And so that's probably the best thing I've seen that parents apply. It's just a game changer for them.
Communication is huge. I completely agree. One of our family values, we have family values, and one of ours is to just say what you mean and mean what you say, coming out of the scripture of let your yes be yes, right, and your no be no. And part of that is just that idea of open communication, and we have very awkward dinner conversations. I'll just tell you, we've even had guests over where a dinner conversation that is awkward has had to happen, and their eyes get really big, and they're like, "Oh, you're talking about this," and like, we're talking about this. But it's so important. And let me tell parents too who are in this and speaking to parents, because I know and have experienced that your child's done with school and you say, "How are you?" and they grunt, you know, like, you know, and then you shut down because you're like, I'm not going to go into it. It is ultimately valuable to push through that. And if you can, be a little creative. Don't use yes or no questions. Try to formulate a question that they have to answer with more than one word, and lean into, and you will get value out of that. Like, I'm telling you, to have that open communication and to be able to have those conversations, especially in the boring things, so that in the hard things you can talk about it, is super important. And
I would say that too. My mom was a master at this.
So good.
And like I said, I do work with teenagers a lot, so I do get a lot of experience from there. But I will say that I learned love breaks all barriers through my mom, because what she would do is, I played baseball, sport she had no clue about. But often she knew more than she let on. But she would appeal, and for parents as well, appeal to ignorance. Appeal, like, if your kid does anything, and most kids do something. They play video games, or they play sports, or they do that. Anything, appeal to ignorance. You have no idea. If you're the dad out there who just pretends they know everything about the sport, just don't do it. Appeal to a lot of ignorance and just say, hey, I noticed, in the game the other day, you went to the next base, and how did you do that? Why did that happen? Or I noticed when this person threw this ball over here, or when you played the trumpet and you sounded this way, why does it sound that way? Why doesn't it sound this way? What's the difference between a trumpet and a tuba? Like, talk about the things that they're already into and appeal to just ignorance. You may know the answer, but I mean, if they do that day in and day out, they're going to light up. It might be crazy. Google some stuff about the Call of Duty game they're playing and just ask them. I love that. Who is this person over here? How does this work? And that will help out a ton. Love breaks all barriers, and just appeal to a lot of ignorance, and just ask them about what they love.
Well, that is fantastic advice. I can't emphasize that enough. And thank you for being with us today. Where can they find you, Nick, if they want to?
You can find me on any social media site at Nick W. Henderson, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, unfortunately. Anywhere on social media, Nick W. Henderson, Nick W. Henderson, Nick on Nick. But yeah, pretty much anywhere on social media.
Fantastic. Thanks for being here today, and thank you for listening. Do check me out as well, churchpublic.com, and of course all the social medias. Like, subscribe, do all those things. Thanks for being with us today at Church Public. God bless, and keep the faith.